What's going on, y'all? We are 8 cubes, 4 lenses as well today, both of us wearing glasses, and we are here to talk to you about the 8 most important topics in Marvel Snap, starting with next month's Season Pass card, Baron Zemo. Baron Zemo is a 3/5 who takes the lowest cost card from your opponent's deck and puts it on your side of the board at the location that he was played. Now, typically, this is a 3/6, a 3/7, a 3/8, especially if you're curving it out. One interesting dynamic about Baron Zemo, however, is he will help your opponent if you play him on basically any turn other than 6. Taking a cheap card out of your opponent's deck on turn 3, meaning going into turn 4, is actually usually good for them. They're looking to, most of the time, play a 4-drop on 4, a 5-drop on 5, things of that nature. They're not really comboing out those early 1s and 2s on turns 4, 5, and 6, which means Baron Zemo has a hidden cost despite his very clear upside of being an overstated big guy, which I think is an interesting dynamic. What about you, Lamby?
Right, so I just want to go the other way first and say that, like, if you play this card on turn 6, your 3/5 could potentially be a 3/5 plus a 4 cost, 5 cost, or 6 cost, which is just possibly bigger than a blob, which is
Mm-hmm.
crazy. But of course, like you said, the on-curve scenarios are not the most fantastic. Having said that, yes, we do thin their deck of a small card, but we definitely on the flip side, it's like you said, right? Overstated card regardless, because 3/5, even if you pull a 1-drop, 2-drop, it's like gonna be bigger than the average 3-drop. So in the grand scheme of things, I think it's still gonna be plus stats for you. And yes, you do give them like a possibly smoother curve, but that's on the assumption that they've been curving perfectly to begin with anyway. So I honestly, as much as I know that there are some downsides here, I don't really think it's gonna be that big of a deal. I think it's gonna be a relatively strong stat stick regardless of when you play the card.
What decks do you see being interested in this specifically in the context of would I rather play this or Gladiator? Would I rather play this or Cosmo? Would I rather play this or Rogue? Like, how often is this making it into slots that would otherwise be occupied by tech cards? And how competitive is it with the best 3 drops in the game?
Right, so we talk about the Gladiator being like that, assumingly like Hope Summers Gladiator good stuffs deck, right? So I feel that deck always has like slots for like more stats because the tech cards are flexible based on like meta. Like most of the time, people just run like a Shang, a Mobius. Of course, if Mobius ever gets out of fashion, this Zemo will just fit perfectly in because it's just pure stats instead of like disruption, right? So I think it's very easy to fit into like a stats deck. I would play it in alongside Gladiator in like just a good tempo stats deck, maybe just with Hope Summers and stuff like that. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking so far. I haven't thought about it in like niche like special decks yet, but I think this kind of card, because the bonus of this card comes from your opponent's deck, you can't really rely on it to like combo out with whatever's in your deck, right? So I think most of the time you're just playing it as like, all right, 3/5, get a bit more stats, let's go kind of thing. So better to play this kind of card in like a generic just stats shell and not so much of like a combo deck, because like you wouldn't really know what you're comboing with anyway.
Yeah, I've been thinking about a lot of like specific use cases for this guy, which is like, all right, would I play him in a Loki deck? And I think the answer is yes, because a lot of
Yeah.
Loki decks are Elsa decks right now. They want to be able to have the board full, and the more full the board is, the more points you're getting out of the Elsa, right? But by the same token, you can't really play this on a Hope Summers. That's not really like a play you make very often. You just end up clogging your Hope lane. And so you end up in an odd spot in terms of where this guy fits into the baseline deck that he wants to go in, which is Hope, mid range, I want a good 3-drop deck, right? And so it's like, I think this card will pop off. Like, I think there are going to be like a bunch of screenshots where you get your opponent's, like, I don't know, it's the final turn and you get
Hulk.
their vision or whatever, right? Like, it's going to be one of those, or it's just like, oh my God, that's an unbelievable return for 3 energy. And I think there's very few bad results, but I think genuinely, like, this is a card that has some really hidden drawbacks where the upside of it is very obvious whenever it happens, right? And the downside of it is hidden in either in A, the fact that it takes up a board space, which limits where you want to put it, or B, it's going to be helping your opponent draw better cards. And I think that, like, that kind of thing is a very fascinating hidden downside to put onto a card that has such obviously huge upside. I think it's a very interesting card that I'm gonna have to see how it lands. But I mean, like, my ape brain is thinking, I mean, I'd love to play a 312. Like, that sounds awesome. I would love to do that.
I just thought of something, and I think I should definitely point this out because that's probably the first thing I'm gonna try, which is that this card is like a one card Miss Marvel activator. Like, can you imagine like
What if
Miss
it's a
Marvel
3
middle?
though?
I mean, what's the chance it's a 3 if you play on 6,
Pretty
right? So
reasonable.
but if you think about it, like the pre-nerf Miss Marvel was OP because like you can Miss Marvel on turn 4 and then do stuff and then play Doom on turn 6, right? And then like it triggers. But now you can like do other stuff, and on your final turn you just need to play Zemo on the left or right. And most of the time, I believe it's not gonna pull a 3 cost card and you get like Omega stats. I mean, it's a risk that you gotta take, but like think of it, it's like a risk that you pull a 3 cost card, but if you don't, you spend 3 energy to get extra +5 from Miss Marvel and like a lot of stats from whatever you pull. So that's just for the cost of 3. So I think
Yeah.
it's something to explore for sure.
There's also like the more specific cases where it's like, if I am playing this card against Loki, it's a 3/7 that's probably not that good. If I am playing this card against Destroy, it might kill my own stuff. If I am playing this card against Thanos, it's a 3/6 that draws me a card. And I think all those outcomes are pretty good, but I'm not sure that it's like the reason you play the card is to get those outcomes. Those are like the low rolls, and it seems like there's fairly common ones in the metagame right now. Oh god, and God forbid discard, right? You play this, you get a blade.
Yeah.
Play this, you get a Colleen wing. Oof. Next up is Red Hulk, and Red Hulk is a 6/11 that gets +4 when it is in your hand or on the board. That every time your opponent ends a turn with unspent energy. So it's a very clear high evolutionary counter. I think this actually likely could impact high evolutionary's viability because a lot of Evo decks are like lock down one lane, Hulk wins the other. And if you're skipping, their Red Hulk is bigger than your Hulk. I think the real question is, does this go anywhere else? I've come up with a couple of plausible spots for it. It probably replaces Giganto and Hella decks, right? Or like
Yes.
a Black Knight deck. It's like a very solid Black Knight type target. It probably will. Here's I think the real question mark is: does this card go into Hope decks, replacing either Doom or Magneto, or forcing you to run 3/6 drops? And here's the weirder one: does this card replace Blob in Thanos decks?
Right, so I want to address the Thanos one first because I've been thinking about it myself a little bit. Like, okay, this is gonna sound so like, come on, Lamby, but like, I actually miss playing Scar Thanos, like just the big stuff Thanos, and
Yeah, but
this card
we
fits.
can't do that anymore.
I
Can
mean,
we?
you can still wave, right? Like we haven't done like the wave stuff, like wave big stuff Thanos. Of course, this is like the most vulnerable deck to Shang ever, which is why the Kyra gets back into the deck. Like it's a totally different deck. It's like you just jam out big stuffs, right? Call Obsidian, then you jam out like wave into Hulk, into whatever, and then play Kyra to seal the deal. Like it's just that kind of deck again. I just want to play that again instead of just playing like small ball Thanos. I mean, like of course, small ball Thanos is like the best deck in the game right now. But like I guess Red Hulk gives you a bit of incentive to play big boys, and I really want to play that. Regarding the whole Hope Summers mid range deck and like multiple 6 drops things, I thought about it and like, yeah, maybe there's a chance that it's very difficult to replace things like Doom and Magneto, right? Because those cards are just like they are effective without being too big on their own as well. This card has to be like maybe a 6/19 to like actually be better than those cards. So yeah, have to take a look at that and see how it turns out.
The other thing that's like weird to me about, okay, this card's coming out, it's 6/19, it's very big. I think that there are decks that are very interested in a very big guy. What I'm kind of wondering is like, is there a high Evo type deck that just wants the high Evo Hulk? Like, is there a deck that you could play as a lockdown deck that's just like, damn, I don't have a high Evo Hulk? Are there any decks that are splashing high Evo basically just for like Hulk and, Storm? Or not Storm, or Misty Knight or whatever, right? And I think those decks, like what I'm wondering about Red Hulk is, can he create a non-high Evo type deck where you are playing that kind of game plan? It's just that now you can put it in a normal lockdown shell. I think that's kind of interesting. Let's talk about the Thanos subsidy. And what I mean by that is the fact that there are a bunch of cards that are widely regarded as excellent because they are good in Thanos, even though they don't really succeed elsewhere. And that could be, Blob is sort of the classic example of this as a Thanos card. It only goes here. But you mentioned Scar. Scar is a card that has only ever done anything in Thanos. It was only ever a part of a Thanos deck. And it was a very important part of a Thanos deck until a better, cheaper dude came along in the form of Mockingbird, right? Like, this is a kind of common thing where Thanos is like running best in slot, best in slot, best in slot, best in slot, and it's the best Mockingbird deck, it's the best Cull deck, it's the best, Blob deck. We've said that ad nauseum, but how does that turn around on people who are looking to pick up those cards in caches, right? Because we have a blob cache towards the end of this month. And I was thinking about this as I did my review of the spotlight caches for the month, was like, okay, is Thanos even going to be good then? And if it's not, do you even need to buy this? And with Red Hulk in the meta, would you rather just pick up a Red Hulk in the Red Hulk cache and play that instead of Blob? How much of a drop off is that going to be? And so part of what I was thinking about is the way in which Thanos is sort of keeping these cards afloat. Would you be buying Blob if it wasn't a Thanos card? Probably not. Would you be buying Cull Obsidian? I mean, maybe if you're a zoo gamer, right? Like, these are cards that are, if they ever come back in the caches, wholly reliant on Thanos being a thing. And that's kind of a fascinating spot for it to be in.
I want to further add one more extremely. It's gonna sound so epic, but it's so true as well. Like now that you've mentioned this thing, and I suddenly start to think about it, right? I feel
Mhm.
like if Thanos wasn't a thing, I would be also a lot less incentivized to buy Mockingbird. It sounds so
I
crazy.
specifically didn't mention that on purpose. She's still a good card.
Yeah. No, but it sounds so crazy because like we've been so used to 0 cost Mockingbird, 1 cost Mockingbird, and every other deck that runs her right now cannot effectively do that. Like her value diminishes so much if it's not Thanos. I'm not saying that she's bad. Like if you play Junk and then like you play the Bridge, she's still a 3/9. That's fantastic. But like the world is now in a 0/9 Mockingbird era, and like there's no other deck that does it consistently like Thanos. So the Mockingbird stonks actually drop a lot if not for Thanos, So it's crazy how Thanos really is just the ultimate best in slot deck for like everything. It's arguably even the best in slot like Vision deck, and like Vision is even easier to run in other decks. And in Thanos is still the best, right? It's also
Yeah.
the best in slot Prof and Alive deck also because you get to ram them out and you get to have like cheap stones and stuff on the board. So
I don't know if it's the best in slot prof deck right now, but
which one is
maybe.
better?
I will get
Which
to
one's
that.
better? Okay.
So there are two main styles of Clog right now. One of them is the like typical mid-range one where you're playing like your reasonable Sentry Annie and all the like typical curve out stuff. You got your cannonball in there. You're playing a Mockingbird for your debris. You're just playing a lot of stats alongside your good cards, right? The other one is the one that I've seen a lot in High Infinite, which is not to say it's better, just that like there are some people in High Infinite who are very devoted to it. It's the Ravona Goblin Professor X build, which is a little bit more pushed towards doing something a little bit different. And I think that both of these decks are really underrated, specifically because they farm the living hell out of Thanos, right? Being able to clog up a Thanos deck is incredibly, incredibly important. Thanos is not a deck that has no weaknesses. One of its very defined weaknesses is it really needs to get those stones on the board. And when it gets those stones on the board, well, it doesn't have a lot of space for other stuff, which is part of why it's such a big guy's deck. You have like 2 stones in a location and a Cull Obsidian, and that's an actual threat, right? 2 stones in a location and a Mockingbird, and that's an actual threat. And you are not paying very much for those actual threats because it's kind of just what you want to be doing anyway. And you end up in these spots where, as a Thanos player, you're getting to like 3 spaces on a location by like turn 4, and Clog can really take advantage of that.
Yeah, so I want to add a bit more to the whole like Clog versus Thanos matchup thing. This was about like 6 days ago for me when I was playing the deck actively. So the stats were I was 10-1 in battles in Conquest, and I think about like almost half of that were Thanos. So it's like 50 plus games with this deck, 10-1, and like half of it was about Thanos. So this deck is like weirdly just very good into Thanos. Like it's kept afloat a lot of the time because Thanos is like a popular deck. Because like you mentioned, by like turn 3 or 4. Thanos is like one of the locations that's like 3 cards. And it's very difficult to clock yourself safely without like it being a Vision or Jeff. And now even with Hope Summers in the picture, it's like easier for your opponent to determine where it's likely for them to clock you, right? Because the Hope Summers lane would usually be a little bit more full. And the most important thing with Clock that I realized is that a lot of the time the Thanos players cannot realistically like put cards in every places to prevent you from clogging them with a rock. So it's actually quite often you just can get away with clogging one of their lanes and they can't really do anything about it. And then the other lane you just finish off with like, I don't know, Cannonball, Sentry, if you have Initiative, Alioth, that kind of thing. It's really a matter of like Thanos now has like no way of clearing off like like rocks and like stones and whatever on the board, and Clog just like can get the better of you very, very easily. And like you mentioned, I think you mentioned Cannonball, one of those cards in this deck that flourishes quite heavily because it often, very often destroys something.
Yeah. Next up is Destroy. Now, I think everyone knows my opinion on Destroy, but there's something I wanted to complain about, right? I did my video on Destroy. I was like, I have an 80% win rate over like 40 games at high infinite. This is actually pretty meaningful, right? And like, I got a bunch of comments that were like, you know, this deck loses to Sarah, right? You know, this deck is super vulnerable to Shang-Chi and Rogue and Mobius and would beat your ass, right? You know, I personally beat this deck all the time, right? And it's like, you know, I don't think that necessarily invalidates an 80% win rate in high infinite, but I mean, go off, right? I think there's this thing that happens where it's like, I I actually have no explanation for it. I actually have no explanation for it. This is KM's soapbox, and I just want to know, if you're watching this, and I say like, oh, I'm really doing well in high infinite with a deck. What the point of telling me that you beat it is? What are you getting out of that? I don't understand. Please let me know in the comments. Thank you.
Yeah,
That's
I
my
mean,
request.
usually when people say these kind of things, it's more like they don't see what you are seeing, so they're just like, oh, but I can beat this deck. It's that kind of thing. But that
Right,
doesn't
but
mean
it's
that.
like, of
Yeah.
all the things to say it about, the one where I have an 80% win rate does not make sense to say that about. Like, if I'm like, oh, here's a cook, I totally understand being like, here's the stuff the cook loses to. But why? Like, I feel like if I ask you, hey, Lamby, is Destroy a top 5 deck right now?
Honestly, I think it actually is. Like, I
Right.
honestly think, right, that no, the funny thing is, okay, so now after that we let's segue into why we think Destroy is good
Okay.
because yes, okay, I honestly think that firstly we all agree now, like at least since we've been talking about this for like many episodes, that this is like the better points deck than this card, right? Like it actually
Yes.
gets more points than this card. So the head to head with this card, this is supposed to be favored. The second thing is also Destroy. Also one thing that we've been saying about talking about for like many like different videos already, which is like locations just like make Destroy win, and there's no way to say that it is not relevant because locations are always relevant, and there's so many that benefit Destroy and like do not benefit other decks, right? Very clearly, Death's Domain or whatever. You can cloning vets, Sinister
There
whatever's,
there is
there's
no
like so many.
location. There's no location that is as good for Destroy as, like, Cloning Vats, Sinister London, or even something along the lines of, like, Death's Domain, that
Mhm.
is that good for discard. Discard has no locations that are that good for it.
Yeah.
Even the
I mean, like even without that comparison, I also think that Destroy is just like more points than this guy in general. But
Yes.
of course, what keeps Destroy in check, which also hasn't changed, is that it's way more counterable by
Hmm.
cards in your opponent's deck. But I guess it's like it's like your opponent counters it a lot easier than this card, yes. But like locations benefit your deck more than like the discard deck as well. So it's like a bit of a give and take. And once again, it's gonna sound like a repeat, like what's that called? Like a like repeating myself, but like Killmonger now is like the most stonks card ever. Like you guys really just need to, whether you are playing Destroy or not, because I'm personally not a Destroy fan right now, by the way. I'm like I understand your point and I'm like supporting it, but I just want to make a greater point of about Killmonger specifically right now, that it's just a beast, super beast of a card right now. Like Killmonger at any point in time versus like a Thanos, right? Denies Mockingbird, denies like what, 8 to 10 power on the board. And of course, in Destroy specifically, then you get to play the free death. So it's like hand in hand. So I guess that's one of the reasons why Destroy also has like quite a bit of like upside right now, because the whole world's playing Thanos.
In a Destroy versus Thanos matchup, Killmonger is like a 25-point swing
Yeah, it's a god card.
because it's preventing a Mockingbird coming down and giving you a free death. In
That's true.
a, like, if you're playing a Surfer deck to play Killmonger, right, which is something people are doing right now, and it's actually pretty good because no one's really stopping them from doing anything else, you can do something very similar. It's not going to be like you're not benefiting from it the same way, but it really keeps them in check in terms of, if you limit their ability to play a free Mockingbird, you can actually go toe to toe with Thanos on points a lot of the time because they're just playing a 6-drop on 6 now, right? Like, there's not that much free stuff. And when
Yeah.
it comes to Destroy specifically, it's like, yes, it is vulnerable to all this stuff, but the way you play the deck in terms of how you balance priority makes you either more or less vulnerable to it, right? You play for priority in certain cases, right? When you are going to null your Arnim Zola or Arnim Zola your null, you need priority. When you are going to Shang-Chi something, you need to throw priority. Maybe you play for one lane specifically. Venom is a really good way of concentrating your points on one location. Dropping a null there can do the same thing. Like, you can dodge a lot of these cards by either playing for or against priority, depending on the situation that you're in, right? You're looking to dodge Shang-Chi, you're looking to dodge a Shadow King. Well, what you're doing is you're making sure you have 7 energy on the final turn of the game. You're trying to not win the game. You're getting your Deadpool back to your hand. That way you can dodge, Shang-Chi, Shadow King, things of that nature. You're looking to dodge, I don't know, a Killmonger. You gotta make sure that you don't have priority on the final turn of the game, right? Like, there's just a bunch of different ways you can play the deck that makes, like, yes, you are vulnerable to these tech cards, but you have control over whether or not you stay in the game and are vulnerable to them game to game, right? In the aggregate, you are vulnerable to these things, but you can create situations where you're not vulnerable to these things. And when you couple that with the fact that the deck has just an insanely high raw power level, you end up with a very good deck.
Okay, so I do think like I agree with most of the points that you said so far, but I think one thing that needs to be thrown in there, like from my experience playing against Destroyers, I feel that now, like personally when I play against the deck, if they don't actually get enough X23
Yeah.
activations, I actually feel quite safe because like it's a lot more limiting because now the whole world's running Mobius, right? So like if the Mobius is down and like there isn't an X23 there, they're actually a bit limited in what they can do. So that's like one of the downsides for Destroy right now as well, because Mobius is quite rampant.
I've actually seen people putting Taskmaster back in, like specifically so they have a final turn Deadpool Taskmaster again, which
I
is
actually
not
like that more
reliant.
than
Yeah,
yeah.
it's not reliant on the X23 proc there, and not reliant on the Mobius. Let's talk about the one trick. Lamby has a complaint of his own now, and I don't know if it's a complaint or an observation, but he has observed and may complain about that there's just like so many destroy gamers in Infinite Conquest, and it happens every month where it's just like, it's Infinite Conquest time, better whip out the destroy. What's up with that?
So there was a period of time that I'm pretty sure this is not the only reason. Maybe people just like Destroy and like it's a safe pick for them. But there was a period of time whereby like of 2 months, I did 2 to 3 months, I did this like what should you play in Infinite Conquest like breakdown on Twitter thing. And for like 2 months, I put Destroy on the top tiers because it really was one of those decks because locations in Conquest you get to see so many of them and Destroy usually benefits from them. So that's why I always like Destroy more in Conquest because you get to see a lot of locations. But I just want to say that like there is like way too many destroy in Infinite Conquest. Like it's I call it the destroy bros. Like I always be like, oh, it's Infinite Conquest time. I even put Professor X back into my Thanos deck because I knew there's gonna be a lot of destroy, and there was factually a lot of destroy. So yeah, got to farm some of those with the Prof X in the Thanos deck. But yeah, this is not really a complaint. It's just an observation, which is like when Infinite Conquest comes around, the deck that I see the most is like okay, outside of the obvious Thanos best deck, like I see the most destroy. Like so many destroys just come out of nowhere. Like, oh, it's Infinite Conquest. It's time to play destroy in Infinite Conquest. Like I mean, we did spend a lot of time talking on the previous topic about why destroy is good right now. So I guess in this current meta, it's fine. But like, I'm really hoping that it's not like a thing whereby Infinite Conquest comes around, people just be like, okay, time to pull out destroy. It doesn't always work. Trust me, it
I'll
doesn't always
tell
work.
you I'll tell you one other thing is I think that like some people who are playing destroy and Thanos probably should be playing discard. Like, it feels like discard is this massively underplayed deck. And I
It
don't
is still very
really
underplayed,
know
yes.
why, other than it's just like very simple and it doesn't have the pedigree of these other decks. But when I think of the 3 best decks in the game, those are what I think of probably. Like, give or take, some things moving around. But if I'm like, okay, I need to recommend an archetype to somebody, like someone messages me like, hey, I need to hit infinite. This is my collection. If I can build one of those 3 decks, I'm very fine to just be like, yeah, okay, those are the 3 decks that you're gonna play, right? And for some reason, we see a ton of discard, a ton of destroy, a ton of Thanos, and just like very little discard. I feel like it just hasn't been around, and I don't really know why.
I have like one thing I want to add with regards to like destroy versus discard, especially for Conquest, which is discard like we mentioned earlier, has like really no way to deal with locations, right? Like maybe now they have Proxima, so it's a little bit better. Actually, that's super relevant.
It is
Proxima is like
relevant.
super relevant. It's super relevant, right? But like this card, I don't actually know whether it's like more beneficial to play this card in Conquest now because there's like X amount of locations that benefit like destroy, or is it better to play like this card which is a bit more consistent and less counterable? Like no one really knows these numbers, but you know, like across multiple Conquest like rounds, a lot of different locations. Is it fine to just play this card and like sometimes succumb to locations, or is it better to play destroy and benefit from some of these random locations? Like no one really knows the numbers, but it's something interesting that you can go figure out yourself and see which one suits you better.
Surprise! Did that surprise you? If it did, you might
I saw
fall
it
victim
coming.
to a surprise card.
Saw it coming.
I like paused. I was like, I thought of it, and I was like, all right, I have to do this, and then I
I
laughed
saw you take a
before
deep
doing
breath,
it.
and I was like,
Yeah,
something's coming, but I
yeah.
have no idea
No,
what's happening.
I thought it was a good gag. Were you surprised, Lamby?
Alright.
Were you surprised by my Shang-Chi and Destroy? Were you surprised by my Shang-Chi and Discard? Were you surprised by my Why does every surprise card Shang-Chi? What's up with that?
I mean, okay. To be frank, I think this topic's main purpose is we keep reminiscing and like talking about old stuff, but it's like bringing old stuff back again, which is like I always believe firmly that like in a game like Marvel Snap, whether it's Conquest or climbing ladder, the most important thing is really surprise factor. Like you don't have to be like the best player in the game. Even the best players like succumb to surprise very often, right? Because the thing is like to be able to play around something, you need to know if it's there or not, right? So the point is we're talking about like running Shang-Chi in this in Destroy. Running Shang-Chi in Destroy is something that's not common yet. Maybe after your like previous video, it's gonna be a bit more common, but like it wasn't common, so people never played around Shang-Chi in Destroy, and that is where you get your 8 cubes, right? Because like people were very comfortable with like slamming like early blobs or magnetos because you thought they were never gonna die, and then the Destroy player just goes Shang, Deadpool, death, bye-bye, that kind of thing. Or like okay, so that's one example. But my point is really just like to get a lot of cubes, surprise factor is very important. Even back to one of the very niche scenarios that probably no one noticed, but like I saw it once was back then there was like team tournaments and stuff, and it was like the Shuri Red Skull meta. There was a match between the Human Spider and Moyen. You guys probably know these two people. It was a very one-sided 8 cuber that Moyen won because in the Shuri mirror, Moyen played Shang-Chi, and it was crazy because no one expected that. The Human Spider was just like something along those like Shuri, Red Skull, or whatever, and then like bam, Shang, there goes your 28 power Red Skull. So my point is really just like surprise factor in close deck list, aka ladder or conquest, is like super important, and never forget that like anyone can lose to a good surprise. So maybe your deck that never runs Enchantress suddenly has an Enchantress in there. You're gonna get a lot of 8 cubes.
Yeah, I've seen people doing just like, all right, I'm going to take out Shang-Chi and put Enchantress and Destroy. Because now people are expecting Shang-Chi. So you can just run an Enchantress instead. I don't like that one, though. Because it ends up just being like, please, Loki, Enchantress my null. And Shang is like a little bit more generally applicable.
Yeah. I want to add one more thing, sorry, which is like, I don't know if you guys saw my Lamby open where Shuri and Joya, he played their Thor control deck. Shadow King. Shadow King is one of, okay, it's not like it's not known, but it's not commonly seen right now. So Shadow King actually has a lot of value in surprise factors because it's like way cheaper than Enchantress and Shang, and of course it eats up blobs, eats up like other stats gaining like stuff. Eats up Destroy, by the way, Shadow King. So I would say that like surprise tech in deck lists that are common and you never expect it to be there is kind of like super important when you want to steal 8 cubes. And if you are watching this and you can't remember anything that I just said and you want to climb ladder, look at your deck, think of the worst card, or look at the worst card in your deck and be like, if I swap this for a Shang, swap this for an Eng, swap this for a Shadow King, does it work? Probably it will, if you want to get that surprise 8 cubes.
I think we're all expecting some kind of Thanos nerf. So I wanted to propose enter your mind palace, right? Enter the brain, zoom in. Thanos doesn't exist. It's a week from now. Thanos doesn't exist. They disabled the card. You cannot play the card Thanos.
It's fun.
What is the best deck in the game?
All right, so I didn't think about this in advance, but like off the top of my head, okay. Firstly, I want to say what I want to be good again.
Sure.
I want like some bounce werewolf thing to be good again. Like I don't have to fear profs. I don't have to fear alive. I can be behind on initiative and just let my wolf do wolf things and win thereafter. That's what I want. All right. But like I think for the simplest one to look at is that I think this card will be extremely potent, right? Because it's the so-called uncounterable deck right now. And like the only reason why Thanos is toe-to-toe with it, it's not because Thanos is more points, it's because Thanos is consistently doing the broken thing more often. But so if Thanos disappears, the next most consistent like point slammer uncounterable deck should be this card. And of course, I think we would be able to see a small resurgence of those Miss Marvel stats decks to be able to compete with the meta, because Thanos is no longer the best thing to do when it comes to like, tempo. So we might see like normal 12 card deck tempo good stuff stats decks come back. What do you think?
I was gonna say discard and then hope
Mm-hmm.
mid range.
Oh yeah,
I
basically
think
those, yeah.
I think the issue with hope mid range right now is Thanos is also hope mid range, but it does it better. And so
Yep.
you end up in these weird spots. But also, like, if discard becomes the best deck, it's like, that's kind of when you want to play destroy, right? Like, it feels like if you
Yeah.
just took Thanos out of this meta, it's actually just an incredibly open meta game, right? People are playing Silver Surfer and succeeding with it. People are playing Clog and succeeding with it. People are playing discard and succeeding with it. People are playing destroy and succeeding with it. And it's like there's a lot of good decks right now. That's kind of a shocking and nice thing for us to have. Like, there's a lot of decks you could reasonably play. It's just that, Thanos is sitting at the top. And I feel like if you remove Thanos from this, I almost wonder if like the equilibrium would shatter. Is Thanos like holding back some greater evil? I don't really think so, but I kind of wonder.
I think Thanos is like the evil that's holding everything back, more likely.
Okay. All right. So you're saying second dinner should disable Thanos. Heard it here
I
first,
mean,
y'all.
I'm the Thanos lover, but like even in the previous video, I was like, let's just nuke this card for once so that we can do other things. I want to do other things because like I'm the best deck guy where like I play the best deck every single time, but like this best deck has no like I have no incentive to really want to play anything else when it comes to winningness. Like right, so like give me something to do. Give me a reason to explore other things because well now I don't have a reason to because Thanos is just too good.
And on that bombshell, it's time to end. We have been 8 cubes, 4 lenses today. And Lamby's going to take us out.
All right, guys, thank you so much for being here. We are 8 cubes with 4 lenses today. If you like what you just heard and saw, do subscribe, comment, and we will see you guys in the next one on my channel. Bye bye.